Hello and welcome to, today I am revealing my book cover, reading you the first 9 pages, and telling you about my pre-order campaign for my debut novel, Reputation, which is out on July 8th, which is in just under 2 months. If you notice a certain energy to this video, a certain indefinable quality, just keep it to yourself. I know people often do a whole bunch of like spiel up front in these videos before they get to the good juicy bits, but quite frankly I'm tired, you're tired. I'm not going to make this like a recipe for soup online where you have to read a 2,000 word essay first about the concept of soup and the etymology of togetherness before you find out how many cloves of garlic you're supposed to put in. And honestly, you shouldn't need a recipe to know how many cloves of garlic to put in. That's something you should just know in here. So, you know, this is a dream come true. I've wanted to write a novel since I was a child, but without any further ado, here is my cover. Look at it, gaze upon it, feast your peepers, peep your feasters. This is Georgiana Ellers, our protagonist. This is Frances Campbell, her new best friend. This is Cecily. Oh, Cecily, you're losing a bit of your wine there. And this is Jane. Jane is not best pleased. I love this cover. It was designed by Sophie McDonnell and illustrated by Louise Cannell. 2 people I have never spoken to, but to whomst I am eternally grateful. By the way, this isn't a real book. They haven't actually printed my book yet, so this is a mock-up where on the outside it's mine, but on the inside it's anybody's guess. Now I'm sure many of you will be gutted that you are no longer able to bully me over the holding image that was used while we waited for the cover to be finished across every retailer. So just take a moment to laugh at it one last time and then say goodbye to this picture. I hope I never see it again. Now, in an attempt to convince you that the book is worth buying and reading, I'm going to read you the first 9 pages in my best reading voice, which isn't the entire first chapter, but what are you going to do, sue me? So please sit back and enjoy my visible discomfort as I read to you from a book that I have now read approximately 80,000 times. Chapter 1. It all began at a party, as almost everything of interest does. This particular party was by no means a grand affair. Dinner had been distinctly lacking. The man tasked with playing the viola seemed to be hurting it a little. A scarcity of candles, entirely due to poor planning on the host's part rather than a lack of monetary means to produce light, meant that whole rooms were so dark as to be hazardous. "It's romantic," Mrs. Burton had said generously as they were given the grand tour a few hours earlier, narrowly avoiding a headlong collision with a serving girl carrying a tray of diluted punch, who stepped deftly out of the way and was immediately swallowed into the shadows. It was not romantic. Her aunt had promised a night of skillful dancing, delicately blossoming friendships, and a wealth of eligible bachelors with shiny coat buttons and dashing moustaches. Instead, Georgiana was reclining in a gloomy alcove in the empty hallway, tying and untying little knots in her second-best ribbon and thinking wistfully of Viking funerals. Norse warriors were often burned on pyres with their boats, along with a great many of their personal effects. She had read about the custom in one of her uncle's books and had talked about it animatedly and at length earlier in the week at the Burtons' dinner table while eating her potatoes. She was just getting to the part about wives and thralls following their masters into death when her aunt had slammed her hand down onto the table in an out-of-character display of force and cried, "Are you quite finished, Georgiana?" Georgiana had looked up from the potatoes to find her aunt's face the very picture of horror. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Burton, but if you'd only let me finish, I don't think the wives and thralls minded following the Vikings into death. The Norse believed in a sort of heaven. If Mr. Burton were to fall on his morning walk tomorrow and dash his brains out on a rock, wouldn't you want to go with him? If heaven is as lovely as everyone says it is, it would be like a holiday. You're so looking forward to St. Ives in September. It would be like getting to go early. Wouldn't you throw yourself upon a flaming pyre if you could be in St. Ives tomorrow?" Evidently, Mrs. Burton would not. The subject of Vikings had been banned from polite conversation. In the 13 days since Georgiana had come to stay with her aunt and uncle, she had come to know them far better than she ever had in the past 20 years of her life. It had become clear to her rather quickly that while the Burtons were a very kind and accommodating people, they were also particularly skilled at filling whole days and weeks with the kind of monotonous minutiae that Georgiana could take no pleasure in. Any suggestion of an outing or an activity that bore even the slightest resemblance to a thrill or a caper had been tutted down with the proclamation that they were still getting her settled. Georgiana already felt so settled that if she were forced to settle any further, she might lose sentience altogether and become an integral part of the structure of the house, the human equivalent of a load-bearing beam. She had recently spent an entire afternoon in her new and rather small bedroom, being forced to try on every item of clothing she owned, while Mrs. Burton and her shy maid Emmeline checked for required fixes and alterations. By the time they were appraising her last gown, Georgiana had become itchy, quarrelsome, and alarmingly wild-eyed with irritation. Clearly, in Mrs. Burton's eyes, the process of becoming properly settled required a period of boredom and loneliness so excruciating that it rendered its subject broken in spirit, and therefore far less likely to rebel against the usual rituals of the house. There were only so many times a person could read the local advertisements, or arrange hundreds of embroidery needles by size, or discuss upcoming meals for 3 people as if they were feeding the 5,000. The morning when a neighbour's horse had escaped and circled the garden, incoherent with freedom, was such a bright spot of excitement that she clung to the memory of it for days afterwards. This was not how fresh starts began in stories, and Georgiana had read a lot of them. A fortnight ago, she had dragged a trunk twice her weight to her aunt and uncle's house, full of the tomes she'd been unable to part with from home. In all the books she'd read in which a heroine started over in a new town or village or castle, she had immediately stumbled upon a series of daring adventures, or got dramatically lost on the moors, or swooned into the arms of a passing and very handsome gentleman. In absolutely none of them did the heroine spend 2 weeks staring at a patch of damp on a parlour ceiling, wondering if it looked more like a man falling over a stool or an owl playing billiards. Georgiana had begged her aunt rather doggedly for some form of social outing, and she supposed this party was her penance. She had been hiding in her alcove for almost an hour, wishing she'd had the presence of mind to bring a book. From here, she was perfectly placed to observe the comings and goings of guests as they shuffled from dining room to drawing room, and to eavesdrop on them in passing. Unfortunately, their hosts, the Gadforths, seemed to only know men and women above the age of 45 without a shred of personality between them. Georgiana had eavesdropped on the exact same conversation twice between 2 entirely different groups of people about whether the drapes in the dining room were red or purple and which constituted the more garish choice. All involved on both occasions were in agreement that either would be unseemly, but that as it was too dark to settle the matter presently, they'd revisit the subject at a later and more convenient date. "They're plum," Georgiana muttered to herself, reaching for her drink as the latest group of soft furnishings experts ambled away out of earshot. "Nonsense, they're sort of wine-coloured." The reply came from so close to her ear that Georgiana immediately knocked her glass over in shock. She felt Mrs. Gadforth's undrinkable punch soaking rapidly through her dress and petticoat as she twisted around to find the source of the voice. The ledge Georgiana had situated herself on was tucked behind one of many mock Grecian plaster pillars. Clearly, somebody else had been making similar use of one of the others for some time without her notice. She heard a rustle of skirts, saw a slender hand alight on the plaster, and then without conscious thought she was moving over so that the like-minded intruder could slide in next to her. In the low light, Georgiana made out a slight figure with a dark complexion and black curly hair swept up intricately on top of her head. She was perfumed with something heady and floral, and as the stranger held out an elegant hand for her to clasp, Georgiana caught a glimpse of bright stones and flashing gold. "Frances Campbell," the woman said in a polished voice, and then before Georgiana could reply, "This is without a doubt the worst party I've ever been to. If anything remotely stimulating happened, I think they'd all keel over from the shock." "I'm Georgiana," said Georgiana. "Ella's." "Oh, I wouldn't be here at all, only my father sold a painting to these dreadful people, the Gadforths. They were just beside themselves, carrying on about what a triumph it would be and what great friends they hoped we'd all become. It was a hideous painting. Father couldn't wait to be rid of it. He inherited it for his sins. I suppose it'll fit in just fine here, though, with all of this." She waved a hand at the offensive pillars. "They're called Gadforth," said Georgiana, wondering why she was suddenly only capable of announcing names. Frances Campbell didn't seem to notice. She had put a hand down on the ledge between them and then quickly removed it again. "But what on earth has happened to your dress?" Georgiana had somehow entirely forgotten about the spillage, but Frances must have put her fingers directly into it. "I hope it wasn't a favourite, another tragic casualty of this vile punch. Here, don't fret, have some of this." She passed Georgiana a small flask, which Georgiana accepted and brought to her lips without question in a sort of daze, spluttering as something much stronger than punch burned in her throat. "It's cognac. Dreadful, isn't it?" Frances said delightedly as Georgiana coughed. "Have some more." Georgiana did. She had never before met somebody capable of making such a bold impression in such a short period of time. She had known Frances Campbell for perhaps 50 or 60 seconds, and was already dreading the moment she'd slip off the ledge and abandon Georgiana to the rest of her solitary evening. She was certainly no swashbuckling adventurer or windswept nobleman, but Georgiana knew at once that she was in the presence of a main character. "I can't believe they have the audacity to call this a party," Frances was saying, gesticulating violently with her free hand as she took the cognac back with the other. "It has all the joy and charm of a dog's funeral. And why is it so dark? I almost tripped on my hem and fell through a window earlier, and then I thought, actually, on the whole, that might be preferable. We are on the ground floor after all." Georgiana snorted with laughter and then felt immediately embarrassed to have made such a repulsive noise. "Who dragged you here anyway?" "Oh." Georgiana cleared her throat, her voice croaky and disused from an evening where she had mostly communicated via the humble nod. "I'm staying with my aunt and uncle, the Burtons. I believe they've been friends with the Gadforths for quite some time. They're lovely, the Burtons," she said hurriedly, seeing Francis's dark eyebrow twitch. "But I cannot account for their taste in parties. Believe me, if I'd thought of the window, I would be but a distant dot to you now, gathering speed as I rolled down the hill." Francis laughed. She took Georgiana's empty glass and filled it with cognac, handing it back to her and then raising the flask as if to make a toast. "Cheers to our monstrous families and to the infinite number of far better parties we're missing this very instant. May our friends wreak sensational havoc in our stead." Georgiana did not think the Burtons particularly monstrous, and due to her current and miserable lack of connections, she had absolutely nowhere better to be. But it seemed rude to bring that up at the minute, so she clinked her glass against the flask and drank deeply. Francis sighed wearily, wilting against the pillar as if there were truly no agony in this world greater than enduring a below-par social occasion. The only consolation in all of this is that the lady of the house is truly a character. Have you seen her dress? It's all pink satin and questionable corseting. She looks like a strawberry blancmange that someone's grabbed hold of and squeezed. I imagine Mr. Gadforth will have to rub her down with goose fat to slide her out of it later. Georgiana giggled, flushed and giddy from the attention and the cognac, which seemed to spur Francis on. She was just describing Mr. Gadforth's moustache. Have you ever seen a squirrel that's been trampled by a horse? When they heard the tapping of metal on glass, followed by a lapse in the hubbub from the drawing room that indicated somebody was about to make a speech. Come on, Mr. Gadforth is about to cry with joy and offer his earthly body and immortal soul to my father in thanks for that damned painting, and I should be there to smile and curtsy, or at least to restrain him when he goes in for an open-mouthed kiss. She offered an arm to Georgiana and they walked back into the party, looking to all the world like dear old friends and closest confidants. God, I feel like I aged about 100 years reading that. Now, I may have made a few mistakes in that. I don't know. I'm not going to do it again. But that just means that if you want to know how it's accurately written, you're going to have to buy the book. And if you want to know what happens next, you're also going to have to buy the book. We've reached the part of the video where I beg you for pre-orders. Pre-orders are massively helpful to authors, so if you are in the UK or I guess nearby, and you know you're going to buy the book and you can afford to pre-order now, please click the link below and pre-order it from any of those retailers, or really any retailer. You can call up your local indie and ask them to pre-order it. Basically, any bookshop should be able to get this book for you. Just want to caveat, there's the caveat arms apparently, to say people in the US, you can also pre-order the book. It's coming out a bit later in the US and it's going to have a different cover. I will keep you posted on all of that on Twitter and Instagram. Back to the UK and Europe, I am running a pre-order campaign for this book. I am going to heavily annotate 3 proof copies of the book. So I'm going to write little notes throughout about like my thought processes while writing, references, inspiration, how funny I think my own jokes are, how I feel about certain lines or characters, and hopefully also include a couple of little pieces of art too. I will also sign and properly personalize the book to your heart's content. If you are interested in getting your hands on one of these 3 exclusive annotated proof copies, and you are in the UK or Europe and you are over 18, please email this email address with your name and your proof of purchase. So like a screenshot of your receipt or confirmation. This is going to be running right up until the 6th of July, and I will announce the winners and contact them on the 7th of July when I will be having a little Instagram live book birthday eve party. Please don't get tricked by scammers, because I know that when people run giveaways, often nefarious bad actors will make like fake Twitter or Instagram accounts or email people to say that they've like won a thing, but then it clicks them through to a form and they need to give their bank details or something. If you've won, then I will email you back from that email address, but I will also tweet/Instagram the names of the people, so you can double check. Also, please make sure you use an email address that you check often, so that if I try and contact you to tell you that you've won, you see it, and so that my soul doesn't just die with admin around book launch time. Okay, thanks for coming to this. I hope I was in focus at least, I don't know, 40% of the time. And thank you so much to everybody who has supported me in the book so far, because it genuinely means a lot to me. Debuting is like living the dream, but also like a horrible, terrifying thing to do. And I'm so glad that I will never have to do it again. So pre-order my book, coming July 8th in the UK. Hope you like it. Love you, bye!